Thank you, Rich. And yes, look forward to a special 50th anniversary bake sales from the Partners Council. It's a great honor to introduce you this afternoon to someone that you all already know. We're thrilled and honored to have Senator Elizabeth Warren here to address our conference for the fourth time. In good political times and bad, and I think we might all agree this tends toward the latter, consumers and those of us who advocate for them can count on Senator Warren to be a voice in the darkness, a provider of light, leading the way forward, and a source of inspiration to all of us to keep fighting for the little guys and gals, our clients. When she first introduced this conference in 2004, Elizabeth Warren was not yet a household name, but that would soon change. Miraculously, the then Harvard Law School professor somehow found a way to popularize complicated consumer finance issues by explaining in her books and in TV appearances how consumers were being exploited by the financial industry. She spoke clearly, powerfully, and plainly, and people paid attention. The second time she addressed this conference in 2007, she had a higher profile, but still relatively little actual power. But there is power in a vision, and she sure had that. Elizabeth Warren's vision was for a government agency that had the power to rewrite the rules of the marketplace to advance fairness for all consumers and the power to bring bad actors to heel. The Consumer Financial Protection Agency, she called it then. There was undeniable logic and justice in her idea. But there are undeniable merits to many good ideas that go nowhere. Elizabeth Warren was not about to let her idea go nowhere. Through her passionate advocacy and resolute leadership and unquestionable expertise, her vision for a powerful pro-consumer agency became a reality with the creation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in 2011. As you've heard today, since its creation in just 6 short years, the CFPB has ordered almost $12 billion returned to the rightful owners of that money, more than 29 million consumers, from financial institutions that had wronged them. It has protected service members from predatory practices, saved consumers another $16 billion in undisclosed credit card fees, and worked relentlessly to ensure that when a consumer uses financial products, they can make choices based on honest, accurate information about costs, benefits, and risks. The CFPB has worked to hold accountable companies which violate those principles, which just may be why it is in the crosshairs of those same companies in Washington today through their special interest lobbyists. There is, of course, much more work to be done, but there is no question among serious people that the CFPB has had a profoundly important impact for consumers and that its mission remains essential. In 2013, her last appearance before this conference, we were overjoyed to welcome back our champion among us, but this time as a United States Senator. As the senior senator from NCLC's home state of Massachusetts, Senator Elizabeth Warren has remained a leading voice for consumers and for the fundamental principles of fairness in all financial transactions and in our economic system as a whole. She has also been, I am happy to say, a thorn in the side of those who work against the interests of consumers. You heard this morning about making good and necessary trouble. Elizabeth Warren does that every day. You'll all recall that it was Senator Warren who was being referred to when Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell uttered those words meant as a rebuke, but which have become a rallying cry. Nevertheless, she persisted. We are so glad that Elizabeth Warren has persisted throughout her life, and I'm honored to introduce you to our champion and our friend, Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, it is good to be here with you. Hello, consumer lawyers, my kind of folks, yes. And thank you, Elizabeth, for that terrific introduction. I am honored to be called a thorn. It works for me, don't you think? I actually think it does. So, I have been coming, Elizabeth talks about when I've spoken at NCLC events, but I've been coming to NCLC events for a very long time, and long before I got to the United States Senate. And in fact, so much so, it's a little strange actually to be standing up here. I keep thinking about what it's like to be sitting out there when I would do it, and mostly what I would think when the keynote speaker got there is like, get to the point, and I need to get something to eat. So I will try to keep that in mind as I do my remarks and keep them brief. So as of yesterday morning, I had this incredibly thoughtful, detailed, long speech written for today, and it was about the credit industry, about the credit reporting industry, and about what was broken and what we needed to do to fix it. And God knows that industry needs some fixing. Can I have an amen on that? But after hearing the news yesterday about Rich Cordry's imminent departure from the CFPB, I started thinking about the consumer agency that Elizabeth was just talking about and how far it has come in the 7 years since President Obama signed it into law. And so I'm going to save the credit reporting speech for another time. If anyone has any invitations for me to speak, just let me know. I'm ready to go. I got that one ready. And today I just thought I'd spend a minute speaking to you, spend a minute speaking from the heart about the CFPB, about how we got it, and what it means, and how we're going to have to fight for it going forward. 10 years ago, I wrote an article for an academic journal that proposed a new agency that would regulate financial products. And my pitch was that nowhere in America could you buy a toaster that had a 1 in 5 chance of blowing up and burning down someone's home, but that at that very moment, it was possible to buy a mortgage that had a 1 in 5 chance of putting a family out on the street. And that in fact, the financial institution selling that mortgage could know that fact and not even have to disclose it. I see the crisis of 2008 as built one lousy mortgage at a time all across this country. And when it all blew up, suddenly people were looking right and looking left and saying, what went wrong? And the answer was these mortgages. How did we let this happen? And that's when people were willing to talk, just open the door just a crack to talk about the Consumer Financial Protection Agency, as I called it back then. And when that crack opened, my view was, man, you put your shoulder down and you run as hard as you can toward it and try to get this thing enacted into law. And so the whole idea was, yes, I'm going to make this thing law. How exactly do you go about making something into law? And so I thought, I know you've got a bunch of people together to help you run at that crack, right? And so I thought, we need a bunch of people. I will set up a conference call. And so the first conference call I had on the CFPB, this is no joke, had, I think, 3 people on it, which I think legally does not qualify as a conference call. And so a dear friend of mine said, yeah, you need to bring people in, but one way to do that is bring in groups that are already organized, and they can help you, because time is going to be short. You're going to run out of time fast on how long this window is going to be open. And I just want to say, God bless the AFL-CIO. They said, we will sign up to help you on this. And God bless SEIU. I want a round of applause for both of them. They said, consumer financial products is not exactly in our core mission, but it's our members that are getting cheated. And since it's our members that are getting cheated, you can count on us to be part of this fight. Consumer Reports said we'll be part of this fight. AARP said we'll join this fight. These were the initial groups that said we're in this one all the way and we'll help make this happen. Now, we did not have a clear field to make it to the consumer agency. Yeah, there was a crack that had opened up. For longer than a year, the banking industry spent more than $1 million a day lobbying against the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and Dodd-Frank generally. It was, it was us against these hordes of lobbyists. And I don't know what else you would call them. I am serious. I would go to Washington. I'm teaching classes, and I would come down to Washington to try to get meetings with people to talk about the idea of the consumer agency. And you'd hear this kind of, the floor would start to vibrate. And then around the corner would come this herd of people, right? And you knew they were people because they all had these great shoes, right? And you just had to actually back up against the wall while the banking lobby group made it from one Senate office to the next, one congressional office to the next. This was the classic David versus Goliath moment when we were fighting the credit industry to try to get the consumer agency passed. And I just want to say, in the movie version, when it's made, surely it will be made, right? That's not why you're laughing, right? In the movie version, when it's made, the mountain from Game of Thrones will play the bank lobbyists. That's how I see this. That's just kind of how I'm envisioning this. But the opportunity, once we got the CFPB signed into law, the opportunity to set up a new agency was amazing. It was a wonderful experience to be able to breathe life into this idea and watch it grow into something real. One of the most fun parts was to read the resumes that people sent in from just all over the country. There were lots of lawyers who sent in resumes, lots of consumer advocates who sent in resumes, but lots of lawyers who were doing other things and had other skill sets. There were lots of people who weren't lawyers. There were a lot of people from community banks that sent in resumes, a lot of people from credit unions that I have experience. I know how to do this the right way. There were people who came from very large financial institutions that had nearly crashed the economy, who said, I've watched this and I'm ready to switch sides here. Before I meet my maker, I want to say I did something on the other side. We even had a cowboy apply. That was like my favorite. He was a cowboy banker, but a cowboy first, included a picture in that one. But it was terrific. And it was like, it's like building a plane and flying it simultaneously. But from the beginning, we knew what we were doing. We were a mission-driven agency, and I mean that literally, from the very first day. And so I'm trying to assemble the team. And I know I've got to have somebody who can do the enforcement part of this, because enforcement is going to be powerfully important, right? We're gonna make or break over here on getting enforcement right and getting the right people in the door to do it, and the right vision, because this is where the other banking agencies had so fallen apart. It was not just that there were bad rules, it really wasn't that. It was they wouldn't enforce them, so you needed an enforcement agency that was clearly committed to the mission. And so I knew, it's October and I'm starting to put this thing together, and I knew that there would be elections early in November. And I'll just be blunt, there were some really good attorneys general who were up for re-election in November as I'm setting this up, the consumer agency, and I thought, maybe one of them will be looking for work after this election. And if they are, right, opportunistic in all things, So the election's held on Tuesday in November, 7 years ago this week. And on Wednesday morning, my chief of staff, Dan Gelden, walks into my office and he said, Rich Cordray lost his election in Ohio. And I said, great! Fabulous! I told that story a year later, standing next to Rich, and he looked over. He said, that was not exactly my response. I said, yeah, but, what can you say? So I asked Rich if he would come and be part of setting this agency up. Originally, we thought it would just be for a short period of time. I would take Rich for as long as I could get him. And Rich came and ended up as the director of the agency and stayed for 7 years. And he did a great job, and I will be eternally grateful. Round of applause for Rich. We always knew that the consumer agency, the very same forces that tried to prevent us from ever getting it passed into law, were after it from the first day. They did not give up. Indeed, one of the lobbyists was quoted as saying, this is only halftime, right? That they were going to be there on the attack on the consumer agency. And Rich and I had the same vision on this. And that was, for everybody we hired as we set the agency up, there was one basic message: just do your job. Do the part you've been hired to do. Get out there and help us set up the consumer complaint hotline, get to work on the enforcement division, get to work on the rule writing or the data collection. And we, just a tiny little group, our job will be to defend this agency. But the strongest defense we will have for this agency is that, in fact, you're making it work. We're not going to have to defend it, and we can't defend it in the abstract. We defend it by what it does. If it actually gets out there and makes a difference for families. And that's what makes this agency so exciting. Elizabeth gave part of this, and I just want to say it one more time. This agency has forced, think about this, the biggest financial institutions in this country to return more than $12 billion directly to the people they cheated. Yes! 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 Think about who those people are. It's veterans, it's students, it's seniors, it's just hardworking families. And think what they've done with $12 billion. It's $12 billion that people have used to pay the rent or make a payment on a home mortgage, buy some clothes for the kids, maybe save some money for an emergency. It's money in their pockets that they were legally entitled to, and because of this agency, they were treated a little more fairly. And that's what we're in this fight for. The other part that I just totally love about this agency, they have now handled more than 1 million complaints, right, from consumers. And this complaint hotline, how many of you have either sent somebody to the complaint hotline, used it yourself, had a family member? Yeah. So you guys have seen this thing, right? Your bank cheats you out of $50. What are you going to do? You go to them, you complain, and the answer is, yeah, like I really care. You send in a complaint through CFPB, and all of a sudden CFPB is behind this. And they keep track of it, and they follow it. Consumers are getting resolution, not in every case, but a lot of them get it. I do town halls in Massachusetts, and I love them. Town halls are like the most fun things in the world. So I do these town halls in Massachusetts, and afterwards we do the part that is most important at a town hall. We take pictures. And so as people line up and they come through, people will just tell me things, that my name is Elizabeth too. Great, Next person, my name is not Elizabeth. Great, we do this. But almost at every one of these town halls, one or more people will say to me, by the way, I filed a complaint, and 3 weeks ago, I got $78.20 back from my bank with a letter of apology. Can you believe it? It helps level the playing field and helps markets start to work, because that's public information. How many banks, which banks, had what kind of complaints filed against them and how they were resolved. CFPB puts out educational materials. If you haven't used them, do. Take a look. They've got some really good stuff that many of your clients might be able to use. And they've gotten out the new rules on mortgages, on credit cards, on checking accounts, on payday loans. The CFPB effect is magnified by how it draws consumers in and gives them a chance, gives them a tool to be able to stand up for themselves. The CFPB has made a difference to millions of people around this country, and I just want to read you one story. People like Ari, who is an Iraq veteran from Hull, Massachusetts. While he was serving in the military, Ari took out a car loan that was advertised specifically targeted to service members. The dealership promised Ari that he could afford the loan, but after his dad, Harry, read the fine print, oh, there was something in the fine print, he figured out that it was a terrible deal. So Harry filed a complaint with the CFPB, and here's what's interesting. It's not just they undid the deal, it's that the agency investigated, and it's like starting to pull on a thread. And once they started pulling on it, they uncovered a scam that was targeting men and women in uniform. Ultimately, the agency ordered the auto lenders to refund about $6.5 million to the service members they had cheated, and to agree to stop the practices that they were using right then. That's change, and it's change in the right direction, and it happens because we built this agency. So the question now is, where do we go from here? Rich gave 7 years to this agency, and I am eternally grateful to him. Rich has dedicated most of his life to protecting consumers and to holding big corporations accountable. And at the CFPB, he fought like hell for consumers and built an agency of more than 1,400 of the most passionate, talented civil servants in Washington to fight alongside him. I am very proud of the people who work at the CFPB, and I have nothing but gratitude for Rich's service. So that's where I am today. But I want to say another thing about Rich's time in service. One of the most disgusting things I have seen in my time in DC is how some folks in the banking industry and some of their Republican buddies in Congress have tried to smear Rich and the good people at the CFPB with made-up scandals. And it's all to try to distract the agency from doing its job for consumers. And every time that they failed to stop the agency from doing its work, they got more frustrated, and their made-up scandals got more ridiculous. And the one that just truly knocks you over, you reach a point where you just laugh out loud sometimes at what this industry has been up to, was after the CFPB helped expose the Wells Fargo fake account scandal. You all remember the fake accounts, right? Yes. The same Republicans who had spent years trying to slow the agency down at every turn and trying to put roadblocks in its way and claiming it was moving too fast against financial institutions. Once Wells Fargo burst on the scene, they went on the attack against the consumer agency, saying, "You should have acted faster. What's wrong with you?" You know, come on, guys. I know that you are trying to spin everything to fit your anti-CFPB narrative, but couldn't you at least make the effort to try to be consistent from time to time in this? But here's the deal. all the slamming, all the smearing, all the made-up stories, Rich and the CFPB team stood up tall. They absorbed the attacks, and they continued to do their jobs. They continued to do good work on behalf of American consumers. And I actually think that's why the Republicans hate this agency so much. Their banking friends have at least 12 billion reasons to hate this agency, how everything is measured. But it also is a problem for the Republicans because the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is government that works for the people. Day in and day out, the CFPB is there, quietly but steadily, doing its job on behalf of the American people. They stand for the proposition that we can make our government work for us. And I think that that is the most optimistic thing I can say in Washington today. So, having said that, we know there are tough fights ahead. The forced arbitration rule, we saw what happened. You know, you would think that the financial services industry would basically be discredited after having blown up the economy and causing a massive recession. But no, money talks, nobody walks. Members of Congress are still eager to please them and take their claims at face value. And in the face of this powerful industry, some people want us just to give up in advance and agree to turn the CFPB into a 5-member commission. Now, it's funny, most of the people who are saying turn the CFPB into a 5-member commission are bank lobbyists, which should give you pause right there. You know, I want to say this loud and clear. We are not turning the CFPB into a commission. No. Yep. That is how agencies die. Look at the SEC and the Federal Elections Commission. They stood by as banks loaded up on risks and blew up the economy. Now, some other people, including some Democrats apparently, want us to give up the fight for consumers and go back to giving big banks whatever it is they want. And they call it compromise. Well, I don't believe in compromises that mean small banks get something and big banks get something and consumers get nothing. Do you? No. You know, I don't believe in compromises that cut loose big banks that sucked down billions in taxpayer bailout money. And I don't believe in compromises where all the special interest groups get something to make them happy, but the people we're in Washington to represent get nothing. I don't call that compromising, I call that giving in. Giving in means that we are selling out the people who sent us to Washington so that some bank lobbyist can pat someone on the back next time and say, great job. We need a strong CFPB, and we need a strong leader who believes in the mission of the agency. So here's what I'm here for today, because here's what we're going to do. We're going to demand that Donald Trump live up to his rhetoric on the campaign trail. We're going to hold him to his promise not to let Wall Street get away with murder and to stand up for the little guy. That is the mission of the CFPB, to stand up for American families and to stand up against Wall Street. So this is a big test for Donald Trump. If he chooses another industry hack or a bought and paid for politician to lead this agency, either on a temporary or a full-time basis, it will be an unmistakable sign that he runs the government to benefit his rich buddies and not working families. We need to hold our president accountable here. So we got a lot of fighters in this room. I know a lot of you were in that fight to help get the consumer agency, and I thank you for that. We've been through that big fight. Nobody thought we were going to win it, but we won it because we were right and because we made our voices heard. We beat the biggest, baddest, richest lobbyists and banks in the country. We beat them. And now we are in the second big fight for this agency. So I'm here to ask all of you to join me in demanding that this agency have the chance to continue its mission protecting consumers. Demand that Donald Trump not appoint some industry hack or some bought and paid for politician to lead this great agency. Demand someone with a demonstrated track record of protecting consumers and holding financial firms accountable. We can win this fight too. The American people are on our side. So let's get out there and fight with everything we've got. When we fight, we can win. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.